I just want you to know how much I wish we could say to you, the community's ready for you, and all you have to do is dial this one single number and everything will come folding towards you. Hello, my name is Roy Poyon, and I am the Director of Families Impacted by Opioids. And welcome to our next episode of Fentanyl and Families in Harm's Way. What we're going to look at today is community mapping. It's kind of a social services collaboration a concept. This is basically what we're doing. We're going to take an inventory. You're going to take an inventory of your community so that you understand what is available for you to be able to use. And here's how we do it. It's very methodical. You put a pin in a map where you're located. You draw a 5-mile circle around it. You take the 32 issues and you say, of these issues, who in a 5-mile radius has services for us? Then you draw a 10-mile map out radius. And you say, of these 32 issues, who in 10 miles out is available to provide services? Then you do a 30-mile radius out. And you take the 32 learning seminars by topic, and you say, who provides services for these in 30 miles from our location? You write it down in an Excel spreadsheet. You write down their phone number, a point of contact name, their address, and their website. And then that way you have a full understanding of what's available for every one of the categories in your life journey that you're likely going to go through. Wow, that I know, that sounds like a lot of work. Well, guess what? You're going to do it anyhow. Only in the future, you're going to do it at a time when it is least to your advantage. You'll be under pressure, you'll be under stress, and you're still going to have to go out and find these groups. And you're probably, because of those other issues, because of those other stress factors, you probably won't do as good a job as you would do if you took the time to, while things are more relaxed and you're not under pressure, you take a look at your community and you determine an inventory of everybody that's out there. One of the ways that you could possibly speed this up is if you have a halfway functional public health department, you could have them tell you what's out there. More than likely, they do have a list. Sometimes discharge planners at hospitals have a list of who they have. Your managed care organization could complement your list gathering by what providers are in network. Because when you look at this provider list of 5, 10, 30, you're going to want to confirm with your managed care of these, which ones are in network. Otherwise, you're going to be paying out of network by accident. And when you start to look at things like labs and other types of things, when you're looking at these providers, if they're going to send work out, you need to ask them this: is that out of their location support service in network? So you don't get billed out of pocket for things like labs and radiology or whatever else they might be running, testing for sobriety or abstinence. You don't want to get surprised. Whenever you talk to a service in the community, ask them, what is the standard care? And then ask them, are these services in network to my health plan? And then ask them, typically, what is the experience of a person like ourselves with our situation paying out of pocket? Ask the tough questions up front, because either way, you're going to have to get these answered either before or after. And it's better if it's not a surprise to you. So we want to find out, what does this program do? What do they require from us for admissions? How do we use it? How do we approach them? What should we expect? And then afterwards, what takes place? Is there any revisiting done, or are we just done when we're done with this particular service? There's so much out here to help you, and they're all silos. So when you go to a hospital system, they may recommend a system partner. That doesn't necessarily mean your managed care has that assistant partner in their network. So don't go to a hospital system and think, well, because they're associated with the hospital, they're definitely in my network. that may not be the case, and you'll need to know that ahead of time, or the bill could get very high. Well, this is a lot. So let's go to the family table with your family, and let's sit down and we'll take a look at it and the details that are more meaningful to you, because all I did was mention concept. I want to see this be a part of your documentation at home. You're building a library of strength, and we'd like to see you include your community map of local resources as a part of that strengthening for your family members. Start whenever you're ready.
Well, thanks again for joining us here at the family table. As we start to look at what we're facing, and we realize that we're not going to be able to do this by ourselves. Once again, no man's an island. And it will require the inclusion of professional services. The question then becomes, when's the right time to engage the right group at the correct level? Because all three of those need to be considered at the same time. And that's why we're taking a closer look at your community as being entities of support. We're used to going out in the community. We go grocery shopping, we go to school, we go to work, we go to the parks. But this is a different fabric now. Now your optic is more searching for, I have this issue, I've determined a solution, I've developed a decision, and I've designed a plan of action for my 3Ds workbook. And now I need to engage, which is Module 4, local community resources. And that's where we are today. So let's take a look more closely at what it is that we're proposing. And I kind of described it before. We're going to take a pin and we're going to put it in a map, and we're going to say to ourselves, what is a 5-mile ring around us? And as it relates to the issues that I'm trying to find resources for, who in this 5-mile radius provides services that are like that? And you could say, well, that could really get cumbersome and confusing. Yes, it is. But I think that if we stick to just the issue as opposed to the overall everything that's happening, then you can parse it out. Here's the wisdom behind that. You want to keep services in their lane. We do everything for you, just come on down and we've got it all here, might be the right solution. And it may be that you would benefit more by finding a group that specializes in a specific area and they just do it very well. And for that reason, because you've taken the time before it is needed, meaning in advance, which is why you're viewing this episode, so you can then determine, is this the right fit? Do we have the money to do this? Is the timeline correct? What are the requirements? And those are the kind of questions we're going to learn to ask as we start to look more closely at the support community that's available to you. So let's take a look in our study guide, and we're going to turn to the page that identifies support agency mapping. And then we're going to start to identify some of the learning objectives that are presented in this area. Now, this is primarily a social worker's schematic or concept. You see it often used in case management and public health. Guess what? That's what you are now. You are a social service advocate. You are a case manager in terms of coordination, and you are definitely this person's primary ombudsman, where you can go to these community services and suggest that things are being done correctly, or that's not exactly the way I had understood the services would be delivered. Because your loved one, they won't really be able to as efficiently advocate for themselves. We want to keep them in their space, which is you need to get healthy, and you need to learn everything that these people are telling you, and you need to do what they're telling you to do. So if we're on board before they're coming into this environment with an understanding of what this service and support will ask of them, then we could be a better family element for successful lifelong recovery as they start to move forward the issues, which we're kind of aware of that they would come and most likely would come next. So with that in mind, let's start to look at pre-mapping. And pre-mapping is kind of a, let's get the project together, because that's really what this is. It's probably a project that you won't have to keep repeating, because these types of services, they don't move around a lot, and they usually stay in business. So, once you've found a treatment center, they're located on Maplewood, then that treatment center on Maplewood is probably still there when you need it. So we won't have to revisit this in terms of recreating a map every time you're going through this, which is why it's a good idea to do this beforehand. So in the pre-mapping process, we're looking at, this is the issue. Now, what skills is needed for yourself to go and ask these questions? And you might think, well, what do you mean, what skills? Well, if you're talking to an attorney, how skilled are you in talking to an attorney? Maybe there's somebody in your family, that has exposure. They might work for a real estate company, or, in some cases have something to do with legal work, and you'd want to include them in, you're approaching a legal group, or you might have a friend that could join you because they understand what to do when you're talking to an attorney. So I'm just suggesting that it doesn't necessarily need to be you that's only doing this work. You could gather together kind of a team of people and say, I'm going to go out and talk to treatment centers. Jerry has his wife, and she is a case manager down at a local hospital. Let's ask her for some advice, or maybe she knows of some ways or good questions for me to ask. So you want to kind of like build your ability to do what you're going to be going out and doing or searching for before you do it. So that's part of the pre-mapping planning on your part. You kind of take a step back and say, okay, what am I asking of myself? And then you kind of want to know, okay, what's my goal? I'd like to find out what they do. I'd like to find out a whole bunch of different pieces of information. I've got a sheet, and we'll talk about that in the workbook section, of information that I can, kind of like drop this information into so it's there for me when I need it. And then the question is it the right goal? Am I talking to the right person to solve this issue? And once again, because you're doing this in advance, you have the ability to kind of give it breath and give it air and make sure that this is the right step for you. So now we're looking at the mapping. That's more of a geographic location, but by category of type of service, by your goal, which is to find the right category and then the right group or program for that specific issue. So if you're looking, for example, an employment agency, then there's several to choose from. The question is, which type? And we'll talk about that in just a second in terms of, once you're talking to the right people, are you really talking to the right people? And it sounds like we're making a big to-do out of something that's not all that big, but when you get it right, boy, does this go more smoothly. When you get it wrong, you find you're almost like doubling your effort for the same amount of time and energy, and we're trying to avoid that. In step 3, you're looking at setting up your map, okay? And you tend to think, well, are we really talking about a map? No, that's a loosely fit word. What we're really talking about is a location that is a certain distance from you in a circumference, and you kind of like are using that in order to truly understand the tundra of where you are. Where are the valleys, where are the mountains, where are the rivers, And in this case, you're looking for treatment centers, mental health, jobs and family services, any kind of temporary sheltering that might be needed for your loved one. It's difficult at this point to make a statement, I know exactly what this environment will look like when it happens, because we don't. It may be because of boundaries that you've set up efficiently and have kept to. This person that you care about and are helping isn't allowed to live with you. And therefore, they've also have difficulties in finding a place because of the nature of their current health and mental thinking and other things and factors that are playing in their life. They may need temporary sheltering. And so you would sit there and say, well, I didn't think that we would need a shelter. Well, actually, you probably should, okay? And you consider the Maslow hierarchy of needs. They're going to need shelter, they're going to need an income, they're going to need food, water, and that's just the first level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The next one is self-esteem and love, and then the third one is self-confidence and care. So what we're first looking at is the person's basic needs being met in order for them to survive, and then we would look towards what is needed in order for them to thrive, because nobody wants to just stay in a survival posture for a very long time. Now, what we're also saying is, it sounds like what I'm asking you to do is what they should be doing, and we're kind of almost enabling them by going out and doing this. That's not the case, okay? In this case, you're being prepared to offer the highest quality of love, and you are emotionally putting your arms around them when you go out beforehand, and they don't need to know that you're doing this. Hopefully they're off doing something that helps themselves grow while you're doing this in terms of understanding the community, now that you know at least 32 types of categories of what might happen in the future coming. So let's take a look at, once we've done this community mapping and created this inventory, exactly how do we apply that to ourselves? Well, we're going to break out a laptop, okay? And we're going to start to type in a search word. And let's say the topic is enabling, and you need to find a family counselor in your community that is at local distance, and they're in network to your managed care so that you can get this done. You can see how this is kind of time consuming, because that means you got to call the managed care and ask them who's in network. And if you've already researched some of what may be available on their website, or you've called this group and there may be a multi-family counseling service, meaning there's many counselors in this particular location, you could call them and administratively ask, are you in Humana? Are you in Aetna, Cigna? So with that in mind, you could do a lot on the laptop or your computer in terms of all this searching. I recommend psychologytoday.com, and the reason that this is recommended, psychologytoday.com provides you with a kind of a psychology in your local area finder. And so on psychologytoday.com, you would be able to go into there and locate, a whole bunch of different types. Now, when you do get in touch with these people as part of your preparation, you're going to then start to record in your workbook the findings of what they have answered your questions. And basically, the questions that you'll be asking help you to fill out your worksheet, which is located here in the in your workbook. I'm just going to turn to that page, but you can do the same in your workbook so that you can identify what it is that is the information that we will need when we need it, and turn to this in your workbook because you've properly recorded it. But let's just, let's go back in the workbook for this section and take a look at some of the other topics, because I want to kind of I want you to start to realize how incredibly multiversed this topic is. You're talking about all the services you're going to need on a lifelong journey with substance use disorders. You're not going to get it all together in one sitting, obviously. And you're probably going to get it together, this year you got some stuff and because you were dealing with it or you're about to deal with it and you could see it coming, and you recorded it. Next year you did a little bit more in a different category, in a different area, and you recorded it. And then next thing you know, over the years, you keep coming back to this and filling it in because it's your resource guide. This is your workbook. This is your life related to the issues, this workbook. So remember, we're talking about something that we're pretty much aware of. They're going to go through an assessment. Either it's their first assessment or it's right after a relapse. They'll get another reassessment. Or it's while they're in recovery and they get a reassessment to see how they're doing. Have they moved in the progression of the plan of care? Has the plan of care made a difference in their lives? If so, has their staging changed on the three key areas which we've identified from previous episodes as being addiction, medical, and mental health. So with that in mind, if they do relapse, then we're talking about the whole police intervention, emergency medical services, all of this is going to also relapse. So you can kind of see why you're coming back to some of the references that you've rewritten, because of the relapse is kind of forcing that to take place. And then you're going back into support. So it's kind of assessment, the relapse, and then support. And that's identified in your workbook with a nice graphic that helps you kind of see that more clearly. So let's now take a look at some of the areas of types of information that you'll need. Well, for example, we know that one of the things that they're going to need in successful lifelong recovery is employment. And the question is, have they changed in their ability because their minds changed? Maybe they mentally can't do, financial management the way they used to be able to do it before. So they might choose a different vocation because their life has changed so much. And for that reason, you're now not necessarily looking for a job for them, not that you're looking for them, that they'd be looking for themselves, but you're looking for different services in the community that offer vocation training or technical training. Something that might be completely different than what you normally would have thought this person would be going for may actually be their new reality. So we're taking a look at them, we're taking a look at the issues, and we're taking a look at the topography of the community that you live in and saying, what all is out here? For you to sit there and say to the Department of Mental Health, tell me, is ridiculous, okay? That's your job, not theirs. There is no entity, there is no website page that will sit there and tell you all the things that you need to know to effectively set up your own support, community support mapping. That has to be done by you, because only you know the characteristics of the person that you're doing it in advance so that you can provide that information when they need it and you're ready to be able to do so. So you can kind of see how, wow, this is just a whole nother area that we're going to have to spend a lot of time and energy on, but at least it's organized now, okay? We might not have had this kind of formality before because it wasn't available to us. Nobody really teaches this to you in high school and college, but we're teaching it to you now, and you're smart enough to take these courses. So we want to make sure that you take these types of matrices and fill in the headings. Here's an example. It's Summary of Services Program. You want to know who the contact person is and write down their information. So when you get in touch with a group like this, you're asking questions like, who's my primary point of contact? What's their phone number or extension? What's their title? What's their, do they have an email address that they share? What's your website of your location? Where are you located? And then can we come down and meet with you? Remember, primary source in your decision-making model when you're developing a decision is critical. So you actually going to a location is extremely important. You don't want to take somebody's opinion as to, well, Jerry was there and he did good, so why don't you send him to where Jerry went? No, don't do that. You need to go down to each of these locations yourself with your own set of criteria. You're your own family. This is a person that is an individual separate from what Jerry is. And for that reason, you can now help them more specifically with the right level of service. Notice I keep saying level of service. A lot of these organizations have different levels. So they can have you come in at a more intense level, a moderate level, an outpatient level, an inpatient level, a level that might be an aftercare level. So once you identify the organization, you want to understand their services, and you want them to explain to you, when would I use this? When would I use that? When would I use this? And then you want to know, well, more than likely we're going to do an IOP, an intensive outpatient. So how much does it cost? What paperwork do you need upon admissions? And you're going to record all this in this. What should be our expected outcome? What's the time duration of this? What if my managed care pays and you're familiar, you're in network to Aetna, what's my out-of-pocket typically? And then you call up the HMO and you say, should Jerry need this, then, or it could be Janet, or what would we need to file a claim and remain in network, and then ask them, are there any services, and ask both the entity and managed care, are there any services that are used by this group in a typical plan of care that are out of network? Because if I'm going to have to pay out-of-network pocket money for labs or consultations, of a specialist, then I'm going to want to make sure that, number one, I've asked them to please keep any of these associated other services in network to my health plan. But if they don't, how much is it going to cost me? Because then you get to start to calculate, okay, well, what are my out-of-pocket expenses? Then what we're going to do is we're going to look at, your family members, not just the issue. You have family members that are being impacted, and you'll want to look at the issues that they're being impacted with. So here again, we're going back to the community and saying, okay, not as intense, maybe so. What will Jerry's sister need? What will the mother need, the father need? Because they're going through their own experiences too regarding this. This is a family dynamic, and each person's functionality is a value for us. We want everybody to be able to survive this journey, and this is their life too. They want to be able to thrive in this also. And by getting yourself organized with your community and understanding exactly who does what and when and why and where and how much, then you're going to be in a much better place. That's our purpose with support agency mapping, is that you understand your community better than your community understands your community. Because I can almost guarantee you, one does not understand the other. This is an industry of silos, and they do a moderate to reasonably poor job of transferring you as you move from one service to the next. Just count on that. The filler, the gap, the bridge is an effective and efficient family members that help to make that transition as smooth as possible. It's called the continuity of care in the continuum of their plan of care. We try not to interrupt it, but we will move from services to services. And sometimes there's 3 services all at the same time. So with that in mind, it becomes complex. You'll want to have a binder, you want to have this on paper, and you want to ask a lot of questions, and you want to record the answers. So always, when you're meeting with somebody or you're on the phone, have a pen and paper in front of you. Thank you for taking the time to review this episode. We hope it's of value to you. Hello, I want to thank you for continuing to view our episode. And we're now going to work into the area of the 3Ds. This is an important characteristic for the family to develop skills in. And we'll start by taking the time to look at an issue and then determine the issues based on the area of determining a solution, developing a decision, and designing a plan of action. By using your Module 3 workbook and going to a specific issue, you'll be able to find that the first step in that 3D skill set is the FTR, the Family Transformational Model. And the Family Transformational Model is a set-up way, each time the same way, that we will take 5 categories to look at in determining a solution. And each category is going to have 3 questions. So let's get started. The first is to define the issue. Naturally, we'll want to know what the issue is. The word issue is really problem, but we're saying the word issue is the reason we're saying the word issue is it's just a little bit easier to digest, because it's not always a problem. Sometimes it's just something that's happening, and we need to determine a solution to it. The next question is, how does the issue impact the family? We need to know that. We need to know we have an issue, that's fine. The issues can exist, but if it's impacting the family, in what way is it impacting the family? And then what steps can the family take to prepare and then respond to the issue? That's very important for us to know. The fact is that this issue exists and it's impacting the family. We tend to believe maybe there was something we could have done to kind of get ready for it. And if there was, then we would want to have taken those steps, which is what all these episodes are about. And then who can help assist us and the family in our response? So we want to start to ask ourselves, we know that there's an issue, we know that it's impacting the family, and there are things that we could do to prepare for this, but we're probably going to need a resource, information, another person outside of our family, or maybe one of our family members specifically can use their functionality and contribute. So we want to identify that. And then what should the family expect as their outcome? And kind of a start with the end in mind thought, where we're saying, if we're going to do something, it's going to result in something. So is that result desirable? Is that really what we want? Because if we're going to create a solution, then we want the solution's outcome to be what we expect it would be. So in each of these categories that I just described, 1 through 5, there are 3 questions, and we're going to ask ourselves each of these. Let's go back into the first category, define the issue. Clearly state what happened or what will happen. We want to know very clearly what happened or what's likely to happen. And then write that down. Identify who's involved or who should be involved. And then what would you like to have happen or like to see happen? The third question in every category is going to be used. You'll see how in just a minute. But just remember, the third question in every category, so this question right here, the way you answer it, will be reused. Now the next question is, how is the issue impacting the family? Who in the family exactly is impacted? In what way are they impacted? And then the third question is, what is needed to move forward? And then the third category is, what steps can the family take to prepare and then respond to the issue? The 3 questions again. What needs to be done? And then prioritize that list. Who needs to be involved? And then what will it look like, the third question, what will it look like when completed? Then the 4th category is, who can help and assist the family in their response? The 3 questions are, how to search and organize this organization to help you. In other words, it's not enough that you know you're going to go and introduce yourselves to a treatment center in your community. You want to start to determine, how do I look for them and organize my way of seeking help, because it might not just be that group alone. You may also need other services to kind of start to create a who can assist us. And it may be many different types of people. What to ask from them, and then what to expect. Remember the third question, what to expect. And then the 5th category is, what should the family expect as their outcome? Well, that has to do a lot with timing. And if it takes a certain amount of time, let's be realistic of what that is. That has something to do with the expense of the involvement, of getting involved in this issue. And then the third question being, required changes, our changes as family members, for this response to successfully take place. Now, let's state what our solution is. Hey, this is the great news. You've already developed your solution. By answering each of these 3 questions, the third question in every category, you'll pull forward now into your statement. So your first sentence of your statement is the third answer in the first category. What would you like to have happen or like to see happen? Well, that becomes your first sentence. So what your first sentence for your solution statement is, what we would like to see happen is, and you just pull your answer from there to here. Do the same thing with the second category. How does the issue impact the family? Using the third question's answer, what is needed for the family to move forward? So now your second sentence is, what's needed to move forward is, and now you're accumulating these answers from these categories, the third question, and it's actually becoming your first sentence, your second sentence, your third sentence, your fourth sentence, and your fifth sentence in your solution statement. So your solution statement is going to sound something like, what we would like to see happen is, and what's needed to move forward will be, and then the third question from the third category, what it will look like when completed will be, and then what we expect will be, and then what's required for us to have a successful response is. Now those are your 5 sentences. You've just constructed your solution. And this is how you go about using a model for creating a solution. For any issue in life you have to face, you can use this as a way of approaching it. Now let's go to the other area, which is the second coping skill, making a decision. Let's make a value-based decision. Let's make a decision each time that kind of balances with what we value most. So first we want to determine, what are our values? Well, the best way to do that is to write down on a piece of paper, what types of things do you as an individual value most? And each member of your family can do this in a kind of a group exercise. And then once you've done that, I value love, I value honesty, I value relationships and sharing. These could all be an individual's 1, 2, 3. Then prioritize them. Which of the 1, 2, 3 is most important? Then have each member of the family do the same thing. And then you can sit there and say to the family, what was your number 1? What was your number 2? What was your number 1? What was your number 1? What was your number 1? And then what was your 2? What was your 2? What was your 3? What was your 3? And where you start to see many people in the family say, well, my number 1 is relationships, my number 2 was trust, and my number 3 was love. Well, then you talk to another person, they say, well, my number 1 was love, my number 2 was personal expression or confidentiality, or so they mentioned something different, but they did mention love. And then the third member of the family happens to mention love also. You know now that love is a value of the family. So whatever decisions you make, you want to balance it on the fact of, does this disrupt our values? If it does, at least you know that it does, and to what degree. You're calculating that. But at least also you're including, what do we value most? Let's make sure our decisions don't counter that. And now, in the first step, we're going to identify exactly what's happened. And this is, by the way, in your book, okay? And it is for each of the episodes. Now, identify exactly what's happened, what happened, how did it happen, who did it happen to. Then the second step is analyze the situation, assess the problem, identify the problem, and in what areas did the problem create an impact. You're writing all of these down. The third step of that the third step in the decision-making model is, what is the number of one contributing factor? What is causing this issue to take place? You need to know that before you make a decision. The fourth step is, now that you know the number one factor, you need to go out and find out what information there is about this. Your primary source, you're going to go to the actual person or organization that's involved with this and ask them, what is this issue, and help us to understand it better. The secondary source would be, somebody's telling you this happened, or somebody suggests that you should do something a certain way, and it's coming from somebody else other than the primary source. It could be an article, a clinical paper. These are all secondary sources, and you gather them and you make them part of your primary, secondary information gathering. The third area that you look at is your gut. What does your gut because that's often where, you know, our faith comes in and other things that are very important when making decisions get included. So trust your gut is what we're saying in the decision-making process. The fifth step in making a good quality decision is where you're kind of taking a criteria and saying, let's take what we're going to make a decision about and let's balance it on the criteria to make sure that we're covering all of our bases. And this will ensure safety of your loved one, you know. Is safety a part of what's being considered? And do we have the resources that are needed to do the decision we're looking at? And then do we understand the timetable? Is it realistic? And do we understand the negative impacts? Because every decision has a positive and negative. Well, identify what the negative outcomes might be so that you can weight the factor of, is this a good decision? And then would you do this if, would you ask others to do this if they were doing it for you? Meaning it was done for you or to you. Is this still a good decision? These are all areas that you want to take a look at. The third coping skill is in the area of the family plan of action. And everybody could say, well, Roy, listen, we're just going to go out and do it. Well, it's going to get done a lot more effectively. I want to warn you that the addiction industry is not organized. And then again, either is the family. So you're taking two disorganized organizations and you're putting them together. So a plan is a very good idea. The other factor is you're going to more than likely require the assistance of a lot of different groups. And as time goes by, those groups are going to change. And now it's a whole new set of groups that you're dealing with. When you're at the hospital, the ER, that's what that is. Then you move over to detox, that's what that is. Then you move over to therapy and treatment, and that lasts for 16 weeks. That's what that is. Then you're looking at sober living, recovery, maybe incarceration, and then reentry, on all that's involved in that. So there's all sorts of reasons why a plan put on paper based on the decision and the information gathering that you've made, based on the solution that you know you want to use, are very good ideas. It all comes together with the plan of action. Then you take the plan of action and you go find a professional to help you. Everything that we've done up to now is to position you to a place where you can be properly assisted and directed and supported. This is what's often missing in the families. This is what exhausts the families. This is where the families get into fights internally on. So, for that reason, we're going to apply the 3D coping skills. Determine a solution. We're going to develop a decision, and we're going to design a plan of action. And we're going to do it each time. I hope this is helpful for you. I'm confident it will be.